Buenos días and welcome to Comunidad del Valle, and have a happy Mother's Day. This morning we're going to do things a little bit differently here on Comunidad del Valle. We will debate Proposition 227. On our right for the debate tonight, this morning, will be Ron Unz. Ron is the president and CEO of Wall Street Analytics in Palo Alto. He has undergraduate and graduate degrees from Harvard, Cambridge, and Stanford Universities. In 1994, Ron Unz received 34% of the votes in a Republican primary against Governor Pete Wilson. With him is Fernando Vega. Fernando is past member of the Redwood City Board of Education and of the Redwood City City Council. In 1992, he was chosen by the Clinton Gore campaign to hold regional drive to recruit Latino voters. He was successful in recruiting 18,000 Latino voters in that region. He helped establish bilingual education programs while on the Redwood City Board of Education. On our left, we have Assemblyman Mike Honda. He's a former teacher and principal here in San Jose, also a former member of the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. He's leading the campaign against Proposition 227 in Sacramento, and he was quoted of saying in the San Jose Mercury News that Proposition 227 is the most devious, un-American proposition anyone ever visited on our children. With Assemblyman Mike Honda is Dr. Sarah Garcia from Santa Clara University. Dr. Garcia is Director of Teacher Education Programs. She has a PhD in Educational Psychology from UC Santa Barbara. She published the article Origin and Destinies, a Mayday Mexican Corrida and Symbolic Personal Legacy. Good morning to all of you, and thank you so much for coming here. We'll start with you, Ron. We're going to start with a 1-minute opening statement from each party, and we'll start with Ron.
Well, I think bilingual education was a very well-intentioned government program when it was begun 30 years ago, but it's never worked properly. Right now in the state of California, hundreds of thousands of children are placed in classes where they're taught almost no English during the school year. And because of that, they never learn, in many cases, to read and write English properly. The official government statistics today say that 95% of the children every year who start a school year not knowing English have not learned English by the end of that school year. And that's the reason we have to end this program, pass Prop 227, and teach English to all these children as quickly as possible once they begin school.
Okay. Assemblyman Mike Honda.
The reason I'm opposing your initiative, Mr. Unz, the Proposition 227, is because as an educator, I believe that your methodology is untested. It has no data to support that it is successful. Other things about the Proposition 227 is that it takes away local control from the local school boards. They're the ones that should really decide what's going to be best for the communities, because the communities are so diverse in the state of California. The other point is that it takes away the ability of teachers to be able to teach to the children in the ways that they've been trained. Your initiative says that they shall teach English only in English and in no other way. That attacks their ability to teach with the skills that they've learned over the years, and also it attacks their academic freedom. It also sets up children for failure. Essentially, if you're a kindergartner, you're saying to a child who comes in that they have to learn to speak English in 180 days against children who have been speaking English since they were born for 5 years, and if you count the womb, it's 5 years, 9 months.
Okay, that's 1 minute. Somebody with Mike Honda will have a whole half hour to talk about how we feel about Prop 227. Tell us essentially, Mr. Unz, what is in your proposition? What will you do with our kids?
It's a very simple idea. Once children begin school, if they don't already know English, they would generally be placed in a short-term, intensive, sheltered English immersion program to teach them English as quickly as possible. Once they learned enough English to do regular schoolwork in English, they would be moved into the regular classes with all the other children. Now, our proposition doesn't outlaw bilingual education. Those parents who wanted to place or keep their children in a bilingual program could apply for a waiver to do so. But I think most parents want their children taught English as quickly as possible once they begin school.
Will it work having Cambodian, Vietnamese, Filipino students, having them in one classroom for 1 year? Do you think that will help them? Will that help them succeed?
Oh, I think very much, because besides the fact that all of them will be learning English together, since they come from so many different ethnic backgrounds, they'll get to know children from other ethnic backgrounds. Today, many of these bilingual programs really amount to racial segregation. In other words, all of these different ethnic groups are kept in classes with only people from their own ethnic group. And I think it's better if children get to know children from lots of different backgrounds, which would happen under our initiative.
That's really inaccurate. I was a bilingual teacher, and I also had bilingual schools. I was a principal. I had bilingual Cambodian, bilingual Vietnamese, and bilingual Spanish. And in the classroom, we had a mixture of youngsters in there because you had to have English models in the classroom while you instructed to the children. And so, you know, primary language is an instructional tool. It's not a crutch like people say. And if you say that the children are not learning English and 95% of them are failing, it's because they're all being taught in English.
But that is true. I mean, again, look at the government statistics, and not only that, but again, most of these statistics are controlled by the bilingual education establishment. So it's hard for us to find out what the true numbers were. But in Los Angeles,
what are the true numbers?
Excuse me,
Tell us the true numbers.
I'll tell you the true numbers. In Los Angeles, they did a study, and LA has half of all the bilingual students in the entire state, and they showed when you look at children who started a bilingual program in kindergarten, after 6 straight years in bilingual education, 2/3 of them had still not learned enough English to even take a test in English. And that's what I call failure. 6 years in bilingual education and 2/3 had still not learned English.
Okay, we will continue this debate when we continue here on Comunidad del Valle. We'll talk to Fernando Vega, who supported bilingual ed and now is opposed to it, and also to Dr. Sarah Garcia. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Comunidad del Valle. This morning we are debating Proposition 227 on the June 2nd primary ballot here in the state of California. We'll go to you, Fernando, this time. You were an advocate of bilingual education at one point, and now you are against it. Tell us why.
Well, because it has failed. Bilingual education has been a failure for 25 years. The concerns Mike Honda has expressed here about the initiative, let me remind him that the initiative has never been acted upon here in California. He speaks about the initiative, but I wish he would address himself to the failure of bilingual education for 25 years. This initiative has not been tried at all. I mean, it's going to be implemented when it gets voted on June the 2nd. Let's talk about the bilingual education. Why is it that we want to terminate it? Because it has been a tremendous failure, and it affects the Latino kids throughout the state of California.
Is it really affecting Latino kids up in? Tell us about how it's doing that, if you can.
Well, the failure rate, even at the University of California, we have 2.5 eligible students that qualify to go into the university or go to the university out of 100. You know, I used to have a grocery store, and we used to have a box of apples, 100 apples, and by 2 o'clock we'd sell them all. But here, under the bilingual, you know, if we're only selling 3 apples, we're not going to stay in business, are we? So this is the bilingual education can still have such a tremendous failure and still make money. This is the only program that I know in the United States, this country, where you can have such a tremendous failure and still make money at it. We're, you know, it's costing the taxpayers $4.2 billion.
How about ludicrous? Bilingual education is only 0.4% of the total budget of public education in the state of California. Period. That's statistics.
Mike, it's here right out of the California education funding alert. It comes right, the information comes right out of
Well, how about that, Dr.
Sacramento.
Garcia?
Let me recap a little on what Ron stated earlier about the Los Angeles School District. First of all, I think that if you pull the statistics, if you look at the specifics of how LA Unified operates and the different kinds of programs that serve the needs of different types of learners, you're glossing over the main issue. Bilingual education has never been about eliminating English. It's always been about maintaining 2 languages and using it as a tool to transition children into English environments, English mainstream classrooms. If we initiate something like the UNS Amendment, we go back to what was there before in 1965, when it was total submersion. And many teachers do not know how to utilize sheltered English, and you're only giving them a year and constraining them to be able to meet the needs, the diverse needs of children in a very short time. Bilingual education means many, many different things. There's different types of programs, and the statistics and the budgets that you're citing only deal with particular types of programs. If you look at the way the statistical analysis is done in LA Unified, you see that they're pulled with other schools all over. LA Unified is a huge, humongous district. There's never been an adequate implementation of programs, not because there wasn't a commitment on the part of bilingual educators, but because the resources were not allocated at the district level to be able to provide the quality education that bilingual education was meant to provide, starting with the university and all the way through. And there's been research to counter what Fernando's comment. There's been research that's been done on how bilinguals are the ones that are most successful going from elementary to high school and to the university. Cognitively, these people had more capacity for developing academic skills.
We're back to debate Proposition 227 here on Comunidad del Valle. First, next let's go to Assemblyman Mike Honda. Two questions here. One, are there problems with bilingual education?
Well, let me get back to Ron's comment about bilingual education, that you can't have bilingual education for all the kids, the 120 languages we have in the state of California. That's not the point. That's the problem. People don't understand what bilingual education really means. You take the principles of bilingual education, you apply it to youngsters, whether it's individuals or small groups or a whole school. It's the application and utilization of primary language as an instructional tool so that youngsters can understand what's being taught them. That's what bilingual education is all about. And you talk about English, that all these kids are failing. Let me tell you, here's some statistics for you to chew on.
Okay.
This is unfortunate, but today, in grades 9 through 12, Latino children, Latino students at the secondary schools are failing at 5.6%.
How much?
Twice as many as white students. But the black students, the African-American students, are failing at 6.6% grades 9 through 12. And they're all being taught in English. So it's really not the issue about bilingual education or anything else like that. There's something wrong in the educational system.
But
They're all being taught in English.
Mike,
So if we're going to apply
bilingual
English,
education is so important to the economy, global economy. I ask you, how many English-speaking students are in bilingual education? You know,
at River Glen,
Yeah.
We have a
40
total,
students
we
in
have
a year.
No, there are many other programs.
And it's double immersion.
and it's being
There's
done
a-
right. And in Cupertino, they're looking at
what
another one.
percentage is that?
That's right.
What
Not
percentage?
enough. Not
Yeah,
enough.
not enough.
But if you say that globally that we want people to have at least 2 languages to be competitive in the world, why eliminate the language at the younger
The
age?
parents want their children to learn English.
Here's the
They
problem.
are
No one
learning
is saying
English.
that you shouldn't learn English.
Okay.
No one is saying that through the
At my
bilingual
house,
program
I have
that
this
you
sign
shouldn't
sticking
learn
out the
English.
window, and the day doesn't go by that people drop by and say, "Señor, I want my child to in your school. We want them to learn English."
Okay,
Every
we're
parent
going
wants
to
their
have to take
child to
another
learn
break.
English.
We're going to have to take another break, and then we'll be right back to kind of sum up our debate here on Comunidad del Valle. Proposition 227. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Comunidad del Valle. Now, a two-part question to the anti-227 side. Are there problems with bilingual education to this point? And if so, why hasn't anything been done to correct it in the last 25, 30 years?
Well, it's not an issue of what hasn't been done. It's an issue of looking at the status of the programs to begin with. From a pedagogical and from a social standpoint, bilingual education and the use of other languages for teaching and learning has always been seen as a remediality, not an enrichment. And you'll see the programs that have been successful are the ones that focus on enrichment, on connecting with the world and the cognitive flexibility of becoming bilingual and appreciating other cultures and languages. The second point is that part of the major reason why bilingual programs have not worked as effectively as they should have been is because of the resource allocation. Initially, there were not enough bilingual teachers to staff the classrooms that needed bilingual instruction. There was not enough preparation programs in order to prepare teachers to deal with the kinds of pedagogies that they had to design to meet the needs of the bilingual learners or to help them transition from their native language to the second language. we have made a lot of headway with the CLAD, the Cross-Cultural Language and Academic Development Program, because it's not only bilingual teachers that are prepared to deal with linguistic diversity, it's all teachers in the state of California that are looking at the appreciation of language and culture and looking at ways of instructing that are from a point of view of empowering children and learning to look at the transition from a cultural linguistic perspective rather than from a remediality. And that has only been in effect for the last few years. So it's not just bilingual teachers that are involved in teaching linguistic or linguistically diverse learners. It's all teachers. All teachers in the state of California have to have those skills in order to do an adequate job of teaching.
Okay, Mr. Hans, how about, are there any good things to say about bilingual education as we have it now?
It was a very well-intentioned program, and in the state of California, I'm sure you can find a few individual cases where it does work. We're a very large state, and you can always find a few places where something works. But the statistics show that 95% of the children every year fail to learn English. And I'm a simple person. If I'm looking at statistics that say 95% of the children are failing to learn English every year, that looks to me like a program that's failed. It began with the best of intentions as an experimental program, but it's never worked on a large scale in 30 years of trying. And that's, I think, the reason we have to change it and have children taught English as quickly as possible. I'd also like to say that there's no other country anywhere in the world that uses what we call bilingual education. They all use the sort of short-term intensive language programs that our initiative proposes because that works, and transitional bilingual education just doesn't work. It's a nice idea, but it doesn't work in practice.
Can your initiative been written in a way where it would have started as a pilot project first and then gone into, I mean, if it worked?
Well, I mean, the problem there is we have an experimental program. The experimental program is called bilingual education. We've been experimenting with it for 30 years and it's never worked. And I think at the end of 30 years of experimentation, we should end the experiment if it's failed and go back to a simple idea, which is just that you teach children English as quickly as possible once they begin school, and then they'll learn English quickly and move into regular classes. And again, of all the immigrant groups in California, most of these groups don't get bilingual education, and they do much better than the groups that get bilingual education.
Is it hurting our kids? Are we hurting them by teaching them in a bilingual manner?
Look, the years that I've taught, it has not hurt them. And like you said, Ron, there are places where it works. Where it's applied properly, it works. You say 95% of the youngsters are failing to learn English. It's because those 95% are being taught only in English. They're not being offered the ability to have the primary language as part of their instructional methods. Let's talk about your initiative. It says here that all children in California public schools shall be taught English by being taught in English. And there's no, when you start to interpret laws, no matter how well-intentioned people are prior to election, it's how the words are interpreted, and that's what's going to happen. That's what happened in Prop 13. So, you know, the intention's not going to be interpreted. So people are going to read that and say, you have to teach these children in English and only in English, period. So it's unfortunate, but a philosopher once said, the problem with a simple solution to a complex problem is that it simply doesn't work.
That's not what our initiative says, and we have a secret weapon, I'd like to say. It's called the voter pamphlet. I urge everyone to read this pamphlet, read the text of the initiative, and read the arguments on both sides. And once you do, you'll see that our initiative is the right way to go.
How about this comment here, Mr. Unis, who's presented by Mike Honda in an article in the San Jose Mercury News. And is this true, Assemblyman Honda? You called it the most devious un-American proposition anyone ever visited on our children.
That's correct.
I like to say something. I have something very much the same.
Sure.
The only thing is that what I say is bilingual education is a cruel hoax and a sham perpetrated on the most vulnerable, defenseless children in our society. Is because la raza de nosotros, our people, do not vote. If we voted, believe me, that we would be better provided services in the area of education. It's not bilingual education. For many years it hasn't been bilingual education. It's been Spanish all the way through, and the parents are saying, we can teach Spanish to our kids at home. We want English. And why are they forcing children of Spanish-speaking ancestry and that were born here and know English, why are they being forced in bilingual education? Other nationalities are not.
Okay.
Those bilingual education, those programs that are funded, if people are forced to stay in there, it's a violation of federal law.
There are a lot of violations of federal
There's
law
a lot
right
of
now.
violations.
And also, the other thing I'd like to say about the current system that makes it so bad is the schools are paid more money so long as children don't learn English. If children learn English, the schools lose money. And
You
that
know,
gives the schools...
That's really a
But
big
it's true.
insult
And-
for all
and
those
that-
people who work in the schools.
Excuse me.
That's right.
They do not keep the kids in the classroom for the money.
But
They
isn't
do
it-
not do that.
I'd
Yeah,
like to
they
say
do.
something.
Yeah.
You look at the amount of money that's being invested in bilingual education. It's a drop in the
Can I ask you
bucket.
something?
The problem with public
But,
education
excuse
is
me,
that
can
we
I
don't
ask-
support
can-
public
can
education
I-
as its entity.
Can I ask you something? Is it smart to have a system right now where, regardless of how well-intentioned the teachers are, the teachers and the administrators know that if children learn English, the schools lose money? I think that's a bad way to design a system.
Okay, we have.
I think that's
We're going to
a way
we're
off
going to
of
give
that
each
comment.
party here 30 seconds to kind of. We're going to give each other a minute, but we kind of got off track here. Let's give each other 30 seconds to kind of closing statements and see why we should vote against 227, why we should vote for 227. We'll start with Assemblyman Honda. 30 seconds.
227 is an untested methodology that's going to be placed upon youngsters, and they're going to be put in a classroom and congregate in the classroom and given one form of instruction. Children do not learn that way. Teachers shouldn't be able to teach that way. And this approach, if you read it clearly, it's untenable and it doesn't work for our kids.
Okay.
227 is hazardous to our children's health.
Okay. Mr. Runs.
Bilingual education is a proven failure after 30 years of trying. Our initiative says that children should be taught English as quickly as possible once they begin school. If a child is coming from a Spanish-speaking family, the schools are necessary to teach that child English. And once the child learns English, the child becomes truly bilingual. And that's what our initiative will do. It'll support bilingualism by getting rid of bilingual education.
Okay, thank you so much. We hope that we've answered your questions. If you're still in limbo as far as how you're going to vote on Proposition 227, remember that Election Day is on June 2nd. You can call your local polling place or the registrar of voters to find out where you are going to vote. But do read, as Mr. Unz announced, read the voter pamphlet, your voter guide, to find out more information. There's also a forum on bilingual education that we need to give you. It's happening on Saturday, May 16th from 9 to 12 at San Jose City College. It is an open forum, pros and cons of bilingual education. Thank you so much for coming again this morning, and please go out to the polls and vote on June 2nd. Thank you.
Read the initiative.
Read the initiative.